Yeah, Shadows was interesting because, first of all, I'm the only immortal to have ever killed MacLeod, albeit in a dream sequence. The whole idea of Shadows being a nightmare image rather than a real opponent was kind of interesting to play with, because I got to double the role of the Shadow. Shadows was the only episode that we had 5 sword fights in one episode. And on a 7-day shooting schedule, that's quite a bit. We actually shot a fight on day 1 and on day 2, and so on and so forth. The Shadow costume, because it's replicating the image of this statue, was a black gown that went almost all the way to the ground because it had to cover you right down to your ankle bones. It had long hanging sleeves, what are called tippets, and then it had a hood that went over and in front of the face, under which I wore a fencing mask that had been blacked out, so there's no peripheral vision whatsoever. It's sort of like a horse with blinders. You can't see anything at all. I had to have the sleeves sewn shut because the swinging moves of the sword would actually have the sleeves swinging around the cross hilt of the sword and catching it and arresting it halfway through a move and whatnot. So I'm fighting the costume. I can't even bend my knees because as soon as I do, the next step will step on the inside of the hem and I'll walk up the inside of my own costume. So I did 4 of the fight scenes involving the Shadow, and as luck would have it, I was also a bit ill. So all of the fights that were done in the dojo, which were the longest, most complex fights, I was running a fever of 102, normally, wearing all of this nonsense under the lights of the studio and whatnot. So in between takes, I would just pass out on this gym mat that they had laid down for me. One of the things about the episode which was also interesting was because for the longest time you don't know whether it is a real person or a nightmare image. And I went with the idea of nightmare images repeat themselves. So I thought, how are we going to get 5 sword fights and a kata, a beautiful, beautiful sword kata, that if you notice ends at the exact spot it started out from, as katas are supposed to do. Adrian did it beautifully. How are we going to get 5 sword fights into one episode? I mean, as an actor, I take as long to learn fights as any other actor, even though I've choreographed them. So the idea of nightmare images repeating themselves, I thought, well, perfectly legitimate. We'll use the same phrase again and again and again in each fight scene and see if anybody picks up on the fact that it's just like a video image looping. The other thing was that because it's unrealistic, the cadence to the fight is not the way a normal human would fight, which is totally non-syncopated. Bam, ba-bam, ba-ba-ba-bam, ba-bam, like this, almost like a musical bar. It's just wham, 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 like this. And what I was trying to reproduce was the feeling of an accelerated human heartbeat, just boom, 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 as you would if you were in the throes of a nightmare. So, in a way, it was a very interesting thing to do, being reality, non-reality, which is which sort of thing, until the last scene where Mac realizes, because the ring on the glove, that it is actually Garrick this time. And of course, at the very end, he's also under the influence of sleeping drugs. So the last fight scene, MacLeod is a little bit whacked out. Then at the very end, we thought, well, let's have some fun with this. So we did the shot of the taking of the head from the POV of the head. And we had this special camera rig hooked up with 2 handles, so that the operator grasped it sort of like this, looking at MacLeod as he delivered the decapitating blow, and then the camera operator did whoomp, whoomp, whoomp. So you sort of had the POV of the head coming off the body, flipping over once and landing sideways on the rug, which was a little bit grotesque in an interesting sort of way, but we thought, well, you know, what the heck, play with it.